Shalom, this is Levi Shore. Welcome back to Sweet Good Torah. So we're doing Parsha Vayigash, a tale of two kings. So it's very exciting. We see the confrontation between Yosef, who's now the Melek, he's the viceroy, the prime minister of Mitzrayim, of Egypt, against Yehuda. And from both of these men, the future kings of Israel will come. And eventually from Yosef, we will see the future king, Moshiach ben Yosef. And from Yehuda, we'll see the future king, Mashiach ben David, descended from David HaMelech, King David. Okay, so we see the confrontation of these two kings, and we see actually Vayigash, Yehuda approaches Yosef, but we're going to see that they unify, and they unify the Jewish people. So at the beginning, two Parshas go, in Parsha Vayeshev, we see a progression. So first we see the fall, the spiritual descent or the fall of the two kings. And this is the pattern. First, there's a rejection of the king, and then we see the king begin to rise. We see both. We see the rise of Yehuda and the rise of Yosef. And then finally in Vayigash, they come together and they unite the Jewish people. And then the king, the Melech, he elevates the whole Jewish people. So it's this pattern. At first it's the fall, and then getting back. The Tzaddik falls 7 times and he gets up. So the Or Gedalia, Rabbi Gedalia Shore, there it is. He says something fascinating in his explanation on the Parsha. So he brings the Midrash Rabbah. The Midrash Rabbah brings a pasuk from Amos Hanavi, from Amos or Amos the prophet. So it says, Hine Yamim Ba'im Na'um Hashem. So behold, these days are coming. Days are coming. Hashem says, the Nagash, Choresh v'Kotzer, and the plower of the field, he will meet the harvester of the field. Okay, so what is it? What does it mean? So the Or Gedalia, he goes on to explains that. First the Midrash Rabbah, Bereshis Rabbah, it explains that the Choresh, the plower, that refers to Yehuda. He is the one that plows the field, and the Kotzer, the harvester, that refers to Yosef Tzaddik. So what does it mean? So the Or Gedalia explains that this kotzer, this gathering together, harvesting, is the avoda. That's the spiritual work that Yosef does and the kings that will follow after him, especially Mashiach ben Yosef will do. And it's gathering together. First it's gathering together chachma. It's an avoda of the seichel, of the intellect. And using intelligence and the intellect, you overcome the physical desires. And we see this in Yosef's life, that he overcomes the temptations of his life, and he gathers together, and he gathers all the gold and silver of Mitzrayim, and his goal is gathering together the Jewish people. Now then, the Choresh, the plower, is Yehuda, and David HaMelech, King David, he showed us this. And what the role of the plower does is that he softens, just like the plow, it breaks up the hard soil, and then you can plant the seeds. So the plower, that Yehuda, what he does is he softens the hearts of the Jewish people, and then they can receive the Malchus, the kingdom of Hashem, and then they'll receive the Torah and the mitzvahs. And he softens our hearts, and he unites us all together. So first let's look at the very beginning, when they first began. So why did they both have this fall? Why did they both have this descent, the spiritual descent? Because they weren't yet doing the job of the Melech. They were going to be future kings, but they weren't doing the job of a king yet. So we see with Yosef. Yosef has the nevuah, he's the prophecy from Hashem. He sees the vision of the 12 sheaves of wheat. It's related to the harvesting, you notice. And Hashem sends this nevuah, this prophecy of the 11 sheaves of wheat, the harvest, and it represents his 11 brothers, and they're all bowing down to his sheaf of wheat, to him, to his chachma. He gathered his wisdom. The wisdom he's gathered, the Torah, is greater, and they're bowing down to him because he's going to be the Rosh Hashiva. He's going to be the leader, the Torah leader of the generation, and he's going to rise up. Not only is he going to elevate his own chachma, his own wisdom, but he's going to rise everyone else up. He's going to gather everyone together. But at first, he's not doing the job, and he's rejected by their brothers. They don't see it yet. He's not doing the true job of the Melech, because what he's doing is he's just speaking diva. He's just speaking lashon hara about the brothers. He wants to elevate them, but he doesn't know how yet. He says he's going to be king, but he's not acting like a king yet. And he's rejected, and he's thrown in the pit. And he's sold to the Ishmaelim, and he's sold down to Potiphar, the minister in Mitzrayim in Egypt. And we start to see eventually Yosef's elevation. Now Yehuda, what is Yehuda's descent? So at first the brothers, they didn't, not only did they not see that Yosef was the king, the Melech, not only did they not see that this was from Hashem, but they saw him as like an Esav or a Yishmael, that he was becoming an enemy of the brothers, an enemy of the Jewish people, that he was, not only he's going to elevate the Torah to higher spiritual heights than it's ever been, but they saw that he was someone like an Esav or a Yishmael that was fighting against the Torah. And they wanted to kill him. So Ruvain, who was the Bechor, was the firstborn, and Ruvain, it should have been, his birthright to be the king, to be the Kohen Gadol, to be the high priest, and to have the double portion of land in Israel. And he lost it all. He lost the kingship to Yehuda, and he loses the job of the Kohen Gadol to the priest, the high priest, to work in the in the Mishkan, in the Beis Hamikdash, the temple in Yerushalayim and Jerusalem. He loses that to Shevet Levi, to Levi, and then Levi, in the Kohanim, the Levim and the Kohanim, they will be the ones that work in the Beis Hamikdash. And then he loses the double portion of land to Yosef. And that's Reuven. It's a whole different story. But Reuven wanted to save Yosef, and Reuven said, "No, let's not kill him. Let's throw him in the pit." And Reuven's plan was to come back and rescue him. Now then, Yehuda, the brothers saw Yehuda after Reuven had fell from his position of the Bechor, that he had lost his malchus, he lost his kingship. The brothers turned to Yehuda, and they looked at Yehuda as the king. He was the natural leader. But Yehuda, instead of fighting for his brother, instead of saving his brother's life, instead of saving his people, that's what a king does. No, he just said, "Oh, well, let's not kill him, but let's sell him into slavery." So that's not what a king does. That's not how a king protects his people. A king protects his people. He unites his people. So he also wasn't doing the job of the Melech yet. Even though he had the qualities of leadership, you can have the qualities of being a great leader. But unless you have the Torah wisdom, unless you have the mitos where you refine your own, personal characteristics, unless you're doing, acts of kindness, and unless you're looking out for others, you may have the qualities of leadership, but you're not a good leader. The world's filled with bad leaders. But what the world needs is good leaders, good kings. So then we see the pasuk says, so in Parsha Vayeshev, it says it's Lamed Ches pasuk Aleph. So it's chapter 38, the first verse, and it says, Vayered Yehuda me'esechav, and then we see the descent of Yehuda, and he descends. He goes down spiritually from his brothers. So he's lost their respect to be the leader. And then later on in the same in the same parak, Lamed Ches Kafei, chapter 38, pasuk 25, it says we see the incident of Yehuda and Tamar, and we see the spiritual descent of Yehuda. And then his first two sons, he marries Tamar, who's a tzedekah, this righteous woman. He marries her to first his son, Er, who is, I think, the Bechor, and Er dies, and it's a whole other story, too, we're not going to get into. And then Onan does the same thing that Er did, and he dies. And then Yehuda is reluctant to give the third son, Shelah, to Tamar for a Yibum marriage. So he's reluctant. Now, Tamar does this incredible thing that's hard to understand. But she dresses up as a zona. She dresses up as a woman of lady of the evening. I don't know what the euphemism is. I forgot. But she sits out in this crossroads. And it's hard to understand. Now her intentions are completely filled with kedusha and holiness, and she knows through Nevuah and Ruach HaKodesh that she knows that through her and Yehuda will come Mashiach. Eventually, David HaMelech will come, King David will come from this, Shlomo HaMelech, King Solomon will come from this, from their descendants, and eventually Mashiach ben David will come from this. So the pasuk says, so what happens is, so Yehuda, it's hard to understand, but Yehuda is this, and we don't understand Yehuda's motivations, but he has this moment of spiritual weakness or whatever it is, and he has a relationship with Tamar. But he gives her a chosem, his signet ring. He gives him his tephilis, which may have been a tzitzis or talis, and the mateh, the scepter. And these are the three symbols. It's the royal ring, the royal garment, and the royal scepter. And there's the three symbols of the power of the king. And he gives them to have this relationship. But it also symbolizes that from their descendants, will come kings. So then, 3 months later, it's evident that Tamar, who's not married, is pregnant, and Yehuda, and she was the daughter of a Kohen. She was the daughter of Malki Tzedek, who I believe is Shem, the son of Noach, and he was acting as a priest in Jerusalem. It was called Shalem at the time, Jerusalem. And she was the daughter of a priest, and the punishment for the daughter of a priest that engages in illicit relations is Sarefa, is a burning. And then Yehuda is the charge of the court, and he's going to sentence her to this death. And she says to him, she says, Hakerna lemi hachosemes, v'ha tefilim, v'hamata ha'ela. And she says, recognize to who this belongs. And this is the same words that Yehuda used when he showed Yaakov, his father, and when he showed him the bloody garment, the garment of Yosef that they dipped in the blood of a, I forgot what they slaughtered. It may have been a goat. And they dipped the blood in the animal, they dipped the special garment that Yaakov had given Yosef in the animal's blood. And they were showing it to Yaakov that they were pretending that Yosef had been killed. And Yehuda used the same term. He said, Haker now, look, recognize. And she says to him, and Tamar says to him, Haker na lemi hachosemes. Who does this signet ring belong? Who does this hapasilim belong? This wrap, this royal garment. Who does this belong to? And who, the hamata, this scepter, who does this belong to? And this is in public. And Yehuda is in charge of the court. And he's the judge, and he's the one that's guilty. And Tamar's actions were completely righteous because she was allowed to have this yibum, so she could have children. And she saw through Ruach HaKodesh that this was going to be a holy thing. And it came in a very unholy way. On the surface, looks unholy. And Yehuda could deny it, could have sentenced her to death, could have got it all, could have just done the worst horrible Avera and just wiped it all, away. But this is when he becomes the king. This is when he softens his own heart, and he sees that she's righteous. And he says in the next pasuk, he says in Lamechas Kaf Vav, pasuk 26, he says Vayaker Yehuda, and Yehuda recognized, and he saw this is all from Hashem, and he saw that he was wrong, and he said Vayomer, and he says Tzadka mimeni, he says you are more righteous than me. He says to Tamar, you're the tzedekis, you're the righteous one. I was the one who fell, and you are right. And he admits in public, and it's not an easy thing to do, to admit that you've done this avera. The head of the court, how many judges have we seen admit their own faults, their own sins, their own averas in court? No, they act so righteous, and some of these people are so corrupt, and they've so corrupted the justice system. We've seen it in this country. So corrupted with the bribes and all this stuff, but Yehuda, the mark of a king, a Melek, a good one. He recognizes when he's been wrong, and what does he do? He protects Tamar, and he marries Tamar, and he admits his own wrongdoing. And he does teshuvah, and that's the mark of a great king. And then we begin to see the rise of Yehuda. So then finally, Yosef. So now back in our Parsha Vayigash, Yosef has arranged that Yosef, wants to. He's put all the brothers in prison for a time, and he wants to take Binyamin as a slave. And Binyamin and Yosef are the only brothers from Rachel. And Yosef's goal is to get the brothers to do teshuvah, not to punish them, not to get revenge. He wants to elevate them. He wants them to be, just as Yosef had used the power to use his own intellect, to use the yira of Hashem, the achavas Hashem, to use these intellectual powers to defeat his own desires. When the wife of Potiphar tried to seduce Yosef, and Yosef was right on the brink of doing this. They were lying there, right on the brink of this avera. And that's how the wife of Potiphar has his garment. Right at the brink, right at the moment he's about to do the avera, then he sees the image of his father, and to him it's the year of Hashem, and he uses his intellectual powers to defeat his physical desires. And that's the power to gather the Jewish people together. Because this is holding us back. It's our own physical desires that keep us separated. So Yosef wants to test the brothers, and now he wants to put Binyamin in the same position that he was in and see if the brothers will stand up for Binyamin. And that's exactly what we see Yehuda do. And we see the rise of Melek. And we see here in what's it? It looks like it's chapter Mem Dalet, chapter 44 of Parsha Vayigash, Pasuk Lamed Gimel. And we see here, and Yehuda says, he says, Ve'ata yeshev na avdecha tachas hanachar, eved la'adoni v'hanar ya'al im echav. He says, now please let your servant, and Yehuda's speaking, he's saying, let your servant remain in the place of the young boy, the youth, as a servant to my Lord, and let the youth go up with his brothers. So you see here, Yehuda's going to sacrifice himself. Yehuda will become the Eved, Yehuda will become the servant, and he elevates Binyamin. He says, no, release Binyamin, let him go up. Let all my brothers rise in spirituality. Let them rise. I will fall. I will become the Eved. I will become the slave, the servant. And this is the true, this is a Melek. And this is softening the heart. And we'll see how it softens the heart of Yosef. And softens the heart of his brothers. And he says, Ki ek el avi v'hana'ar einenu iti, pen ereh bara asher yimsa es avi. And he says, how can I go up to my father? How can I go up in elevation spiritually if this na'ar, if this youth is not with me? Least I see the evil that will befall my father. And he stands up for everyone else now. And we see Yehuda is the full Melek. And he can't stand to see his father go through any suffering. The suffering for the last 17 years last 22 years that he's made his father go through by the sale of Yosef and the division that it's caused in the Jewish people. And now he's willing to sacrifice himself to unify the brothers and the Jewish people back together. And this melts Yosef's heart now. And it says, now Yosef could not endure in the presence of all who stood before him. So he called out, remove everyone from before me. And then no one stood with him when Yosef made himself known to his brothers. And he gave him, and he said, in crying, and all Mitzrayim heard, and Paro's household heard. And he said to his brothers, Vayomer Yosef el Echav, and he says to his brothers, he says, Ani Yosef, I am Yosef. Ha'od avi chai, is my father still alive? Is my father still alive? And there's such deep meaning behind this. And not only is his father Yaakov, who's called Yisrael, who's called Israel, who's the father of the 12 Shavatim, the 12 brothers, the 12 tribes, the father of the whole Jewish people. Not only is the Jewish people still alive, but now we say in the future, we say David HaMelech, we say Chai v'Kayam, David Melek, Melek Yisrael, David Melek, Melek Chai v'Kayam. The king is alive, and he is established. And who is the king? So here in these days, Yosef is the king. But we see the greatness in Yehuda. We see the kingship, the Malchus in Yehuda, that he will give birth to future generations of kings. And then one day we will see the complete unity of the Jewish people. And just as Yosef says, Ani Yosef, I am Yosef, and it became apparent, it was like a lightning bolt, and the brothers' eyes were perceived all of a sudden that all this had happened. And Yosef saw it first. All of this had transpired because this is all what Hashem had put into place. Hashem had put all this tragedy and suffering and all these obstacles in place for this great revelation of Hashem in the world. For this great revelation that all these things that look so terrible and horrible on the surface, the spiritual descent of Yehuda, him consorting with Tamar when he thought she was just the lady of the evening. The sale, the horrible, the fighting between the brothers. And this created a rift through all generations and will be finally healed in the future. But the fighting between the different parts of the Jewish people. And here at this moment it was healed. And it's healed because Yehuda softened their hearts. And then Yosef he saw that they all did teshuvah, and that's what his goal was, to bring them higher, to gather them, to collect them, to harvest them all together, to unite, a gathering and a uniting of the whole Jewish people. And when he says Ani Yosef, in the future we will hear the words Ani Hashem, and Hashem will say, this was all of history, the whole Maisa Bereshis, the whole creation of the world. It was all for the good. All the suffering and the struggles that we've gone through. The destruction of the first and the second temple. The pogroms, the crusades, the Inquisition, the Holocaust. And we see the rise of anti-Semitism now. And it's all for when the world will hear the words Ani Hashem. And the world will recognize. And when it will recognize it is when Mashiach ben Yosef joins with Mashiach ben Ben David, and we see the pasuk, we see the nevuah in Avadia, and it says, that the Moshiim, the two Mashiachs, the two saviors, that they go up to Har Sion, and they judge Har Esav, and they judge the mountain of Esav. They judge, the Roman Empire that's brought this darkness of Hashem into the world. And in the world, we'll see the revelation of the world that there is just one infinite being that's created us all, that loves us all. And these two kings, when they come together and they gather the Jewish people and they unite the Jewish people together, it will eventually gather and unite the whole world together. And that's when we truly have shalom, peace in the world. And we see that everything comes from this infinite being. Everything comes from this loving, infinite being, Hashem. And that everything that happened, every tragedy and sickness, everyone experiencing poverty and struggle, depression and pain, and it's all eventually for the good. And we will see Gam Zo L'Tova. It will all be for the good. And that is the tale of two kings, and that is Parsha Vayigash. Okay, I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope to see you back soon again on Sweet and Good Torah.